Divine Intelligence is a book I wrote about the search for God. I think I wrote it for me. The book itself is a story about a client that, since I'm a coach, going through the search for God. And it's a real life story. The client came to me unemployed, wanted to find a job, and also just added underneath that, oh yeah, Jayne, I want to find God. I think it's what we're all really searching for. My search for God started when I was 5 years old. When I was walking out of church one day, my mom tells this story that I pulled on her skirt and I said, Mom, I'm very upset. I know there's a Father, a Son, and a Holy Ghost, but where is the girl part? And I thought, who did Cain and Abel marry? I've always had this curiosity. I don't think it's ever resonated with me. I've just always questioned it. And then, later as a kid, when my cousin Hal said, Santa Claus is dead, I thought, that's it. God is dead too. It's just never spoken to me. So I wrote this book for people who were like me, that needed a more expanded view of God, a different view of God. And I began to research and find out what was important to me about God. During one of those times in my life, though, I was actually a psychologist in a major medical facility working with extremely severely mentally ill people. And I began to notice, and this was kind of the stimulus for me writing the book, I began to notice that my patients were not getting any better. And then I began to notice I'm not getting any better either. I was still stumbling up against the same old problems. And I thought, I need a process. I need a process where I can find God. I can find His fulfillment in my life. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to build one myself. And the way I started out was I used the scientific method and I just tried out things on my clients. And as I discovered and worked on this, I realized that the search for God was really the search for ourselves. And I really believe that the only God you can ever know is the God you uncover inside yourself. And I've watched my clients and they tell me these stories of how these experiences of these belief systems that covered up who they were, they're magnificent. As they were growing up, they learned they were not quite good enough. They learned that they weren't big enough or intelligent enough or strong enough. And so that God part, which to me is just an unlimited ability to think, divine intelligence is really what it is. The ability to think about things with no limits. So I decided that I had to really create a process. Dan hits a stumbling block, a wall, like we all do. We go through life and we're going along pretty good, and then something happens that forces us to reevaluate things. And he hit the wall of losing a very prestigious job. For me, hitting the wall was all of a sudden I was getting a divorce and I had to seek out help from a man of God. And I began to realize that maybe this man of God was not going to be the part that helped me, because when I got into his office, I had a sexual exploitation by him. So here I was thinking that God was up in the sky and going to take care of me, and I'd kind of bought into what religion eventually said to me. And then it was zap, it was all gone. And I was back to the 5-year-old kid who said, what is going on here? I was deeply hurt and I felt terribly betrayed, but I used it, after a year or two, I used it as a stepping stone to reevaluate. And I thought, now it's time for me to find a view of God that fits, that works for me. And so I knew that I had to have it based on something other than just spiritual laws and woo-woo and new agey stuff. So I based it on neuroscience. My education as a scientist also showed me that the evolution of God is also the same as the evolution of the brain. So as that became more and more evident, I found research that supported every step I was taking. But for me, what I had to get rid of some God up in the sky that was going to control me. And I had to blow all of the beliefs and begin to see that the only way to get to God was through myself. I had to find myself. And when I found myself, it was a life-changing experience, as it was for Dan. And then, of course, people began to say, let me use this process. And so I began to develop it into something. And so now people come to me all over the world wanting me to take them through this process for them to find themselves. Because finding themselves has all these benefits. You begin to see that you are the creator. You're the one that creates your life. You start to take responsibility when you take God out of the sky and make it a transformed consciousness in your life. All of a sudden, life changes for you. You begin to see that I am a creator too. I have God in me, and I have to take responsibility for things and quit blaming God and say, it's about me. And when you get to that point, everything in life changes. Everything becomes easy because it's about you and you live from within you. You know who you are. And until you know who you are, you can't possibly have a relationship with God. And so for me, once I found myself, I found that that was the gateway to a relationship with God. Once Dan found himself, a job popped up, a wonderful job just like that, because he was who he was in this world. And I think that's what we're all looking for, is the state of being who we are so that we can create our lives around our uniqueness. Dan began to do the work. He began to uncover all these limiting beliefs and began to find that, underneath all of that, there's the divine, there's the unlimited. Scientists have shown us that there is that unlimited potential that our brain has. So as he uncovered all those limiting beliefs, he began to see what his value system was. He began to be able to know what to say to people. He was no longer angry. And he could take on an interview as, okay, maybe I want this, maybe I'm not. I want it to fit me. He became very discriminatory over what he was offered. And he eventually began to get what was right for him at that time in his life.